Take a head of cabbage, a plain green cabbage like the kind growing in rows out in our garden right now, and a handful of salt, and I will show you how to turn it into a food that will keep for the better part of a year with no canning, no freezing, and no electricity of any kind. A food that is more alive and more nourishing after it has sat in the crock than the day you cut it. It sounds like a tall tale, I know, that you can leave shredded cabbage and salt at room temperature for months and have it come out not rotten, but better. But it is one of the oldest and truest ways of keeping food that mankind has, older than the icebox by thousands of years. And the reason you have likely never done it is that nobody stands to make a dollar teaching you to do it yourself. Here's the truth about keeping vegetables, the thing the freezer aisle and the canning company would rather not dwell on. There are really only a few ways to keep a vegetable from rotting. You can dry it, you can keep it cold, you can cook it down and seal it in a jar, or you can ferment it. And of all of those, fermenting is the only one that asks for no power, no heat, no special machine, and no money to speak of. And it is the only one that makes the food more digestible and more full of goodness than it started. When you ferment a cabbage, the good bacteria that live naturally on the leaf, the same ones floating in the air of any kitchen, go to work eating the sugars in the cabbage and turning them into a mild acid. That acid is sour, which is the taste you know as sauerkraut, and that acid is also a preservative, a natural one, that pickles the cabbage and keeps every harmful thing from growing in it. The vegetable preserves itself, with nothing but salt to help it along and time to do the work. Our great-grandparents filled whole barrels this way each autumn and ate from them all winter, and they did not get sick. They got strong. My name is Jacob Stoltzfus. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We grow more cabbage and more turnips and beans and carrots than 9 people could eat fresh before they spoiled. And when the garden comes in heavy in the fall, a family that does not put food by will watch half of it rot on the ground. So we ferment the way the old folks always did, crocks of it down in the cool of the cellar, and we eat from them through the long, cold months when nothing is growing. There has never been a need for a chest freezer humming in the corner to keep our garden's bounty. I am going to show you the whole of it today, start to finish, with a head of cabbage and a handful of salt. I am going to show you how to make a simple sauerkraut, which is the easiest ferment there is and the one to learn on, and then how to carry the very same method over to nearly any vegetable you grow. I am going to walk you through it slow and plain, and I am going to be honest with you about what can go wrong, because this is food, and food kept wrong can make you sick, and there are a couple of simple signs you must learn to tell a good ferment from a bad one. And I am going to be very plain about those, because your family's safety is worth more than my pride. There is also one thing, one simple rule, that is the whole secret to a ferment that keeps and never molds. And nearly everybody who fails at this fails because they did not know it. Stay for that part especially, because once you understand it, you will not fail. Here is what you need, and it is the shortest and cheapest list of any food worth making. The first thing is the vegetable, and we will start with cabbage, a head of it, which costs $1 or $2 at the market or nothing at all from your own garden. The second thing is salt, plain salt, and here you want a pure salt without additives if you can get it, what folks call canning salt or pickling salt or plain sea salt, a box of which costs a couple of dollars and will make many crocks. You want to steer clear of the table salt that has iodine and anti-caking powders added, for those can cloud your brine and trouble the ferment, though they will not poison you. The third thing is a vessel, and this is where the old crock earns its name, a stoneware crock, but you do not need to buy one. A plain glass jar, a large canning jar, a glass bowl, any vessel that is not metal will do, because the acid of the ferment will eat at metal and take on its taste. And the last thing is a weight and a cover, which I will explain. So, cabbage, salt, a glass jar or crock, and a weight. That is the whole of it, and it costs almost nothing. Now here is the secret, the one rule that makes the difference between a crock of fine sauerkraut and a crock of moldy ruin. So listen close. The good bacteria that do this work, the ones that make the sour acid that keeps your food, are the kind that live without air down under the surface. The bad things, the molds and the spoiling yeasts, are the kind that need air, that grow on the surface where they can breathe. So, the whole secret, the entire trick, is this: keep the vegetable under the brine, under the liquid, at all times. Every shred of cabbage must stay submerged beneath the salty liquid, away from the air, the whole time it ferments. Down under the brine, the good bacteria thrive and the bad things cannot live. Up above the brine, exposed to the air, mold will grow. That is why you need a weight, to hold the cabbage down under the liquid. Get that one thing right. Keep it all submerged, and you will almost never have a ferment go wrong. Let bits float up into the air, and that is where your trouble starts. Under the brine. Remember that above all else. So here's how you make it. You take your cabbage and you cut it fine, shred it thin with a sharp knife, the whole head, into a big bowl. Then you sprinkle your salt over it. The old measure is about 3 tablespoons of salt to 5 pounds of cabbage, but you need not be exact. A good sprinkling, salty like the sea, but not painfully so. Then comes the part the children love. You take clean hands and you squeeze and massage and pound that salted cabbage, working it for some minutes. As you work it, the salt pulls the water right out of the cabbage leaves, and before long, you will see liquid gathering in the bottom of the bowl. That liquid is your brine, made from the cabbage's own water and the salt, and you do not throw it out. It is the very thing that will cover and protect your kraut. You keep working until the cabbage has gone limp and there is a good puddle of brine. Then you pack it down tight into your clean jar or crock, pressing hard as you go to drive out the air pockets, and you pour all that brine in over it. Press it down until the brine rises up and covers the cabbage completely. Then you lay your weight on top, a smaller jar filled with water, a clean scrubbed stone, a freezer bag filled with a little brine, anything clean and heavy enough to hold the cabbage down beneath the surface. Cover the top loosely with a cloth or a loose lid, not sealed airtight, because the ferment gives off a gas as it works and must be able to breathe out, and you set it on the counter out of direct sun at ordinary room temperature, and then you wait and you watch. In a day or two, you will see little bubbles rising, and that is the good bacteria at work. That is the ferment living and breathing, and it is a fine sight. The smell will turn from fresh cabbage to a pleasant sour tang. After about a week at room temperature, you can taste it, and when it is sour enough to please you, some like it after a week, some let it go 3 or 4. You move it down to the cellar or any cool place, and the cold slows it near to a stop, and there it will keep for many months. Through that week, Your one job is to make sure everything stays under the brine. If a stray bit floats up, push it back down or scoop it off. Now I have to stop and be honest and careful because I always am. And with food, this matters more than anything. You must learn to tell a good ferment from a bad one, and it is not hard once you know the signs. A good ferment smells sour and pleasant and clean, like a good pickle. The brine may go cloudy, and that is fine. That is normal. Now, sometimes a thin, pale, filmy skin forms on the very top of the brine. This is a harmless yeast the old folks call calm yeast, white or cream-colored and flat. And while it is not pretty, you can simply skim it off and the kraut beneath is fine. But here is what means trouble, and these you do not eat. Any mold that is fuzzy, that stands up in tufts, especially if it is black, pink, orange, or green, is bad, and a ferment with fuzzy colored mold growing in it should be thrown out. And trust your nose above all. A good ferment smells sour and appetizing, but a spoiled one smells rotten, foul, putrid, wrong in a way you will know at once, and if it smells of rot rather than sour. Pickle, you do not eat it, you throw it out and start again. Fuzzy colored mold or a rotten smell means throw it away. Cloudy brine, bubbles, a sour clean smell, and even a flat white skin you skim off, all mean it is working as it should. When in doubt, throw it out. A head of cabbage is cheap, your family's health is not. Now here is the great thing, the reason this is worth learning. The very same method works for nearly any vegetable in your garden. Carrots cut into sticks, green beans, turnips, beets, cucumbers, peppers, whole or sliced. You can ferment them all the same way. For these firmer vegetables that do not give up their water as readily as cabbage, you make a brine separately instead of relying on the vegetable's own juice. Dissolve about 1 to 2 tablespoons of salt in a quart of water. Pour that salty water over the packed vegetables in the jar, weight them down under it, and ferment the same as the kraut. Add a clove of garlic, a sprig of dill, a few peppercorns, and you have made fine sour pickles and fermented vegetables of every kind, each one keeping for months, each one made for pennies. Learn the cabbage, and you have learned them all. A word, too, on the temperature, for it matters to how it goes. A warm room ferments faster and sourer, a cool room slower and milder. The old folks fermented in the cool of the autumn cellar, and it went slow and kept beautifully. If your kitchen is very warm, your ferment will move quick, and you should taste it sooner, and keep it out of direct sunlight, which can heat it and trouble it. Cool and steady and shaded is best. Let me give you the troubleshooting. For the few things that go wrong nearly always come down to one thing. If you get mold, it is almost always because cabbage floated up out of the brine into the air, so weight it better and keep it submerged. If your kraut is soft and mushy, your brine may have been too weak or the room too warm, so use a touch more salt in a cooler spot. If it is far too salty, you use too much salt, so ease back next time. And if nothing seems to be happening, no bubbles after several days, your room may be too cold, so move it somewhere a little warmer to get it going. Nearly every trouble traces back to salt, temperature, or letting the food touch the air, and all three are easy to set right. Let me tell you more about the salt, for it is the one ingredient besides the vegetable, and it does more than season. It is your protector in the early days. The salt does two jobs. First, it pulls the water out of the vegetable to make the brine, as you saw with the cabbage. Second, and just as important, in the first day or two before the good acid-making bacteria have built up, the salt itself holds back the spoiling organisms. buying time for the good bacteria to take hold and take over. That is why the amount of salt matters. Too little salt, and the bad things may get a foothold before the good bacteria can protect the batch, and you may get a soft, slimy, or off ferment. Too much salt, and even the good bacteria are slowed, and the ferment drags or sours poorly, and it tastes painfully salty besides. So you aim for that middle, salty like a good broth or the sea, the old measure of about 3 tablespoons to 5 pounds of cabbage, or for brine vegetables, 1 to 2 tablespoons of salt per quart of water. When in doubt, a touch more salt is safer than too little in the early days. The salt is your guard at the gate until the acid takes over. And let me tell you which vegetables take to this and how, for the world of fermenting is wide once you have the cabbage in hand. Carrots, cut into sticks or coins, ferment into a sweet, sour, crunchy treat the children love. Green beans, whole, with a little garlic and dill, make a fine, sour pickle. Turnips and radishes, beets, cauliflower, peppers hot or sweet, cucumbers, of course, into proper sour pickles, even whole small onions and cloves of garlic, all ferment under a salt brine the same way. The firmer vegetables you cover with the made brine, the salty water, rather than relying on their own juice. You can mix vegetables too, a jar of carrots and beans and peppers together, and add flavorings. A clove or two of garlic, a sprig of dill, a few peppercorns, a bay leaf, a bit of ginger, a grape leaf or oak leaf, which the old folks added to keep the pickles crisp. Each vegetable has its own character fermented, and half the joy is trying them. Once you trust the method, salt, submerge, wait, watch, there is hardly a vegetable in the garden you cannot put up this way. A word, too, on time and temperature working together, for they shape the whole thing. In a warm kitchen, 70 degrees and up, a ferment moves fast. Bubbling in a day, sour and ready in a week or less, but it can also go soft if it is too warm, up past the high 70s, where things move too quick and unevenly. In a cool room, 60 degrees or so, it goes slow and steady and makes the firmest, finest, longest-keeping ferment, which is why the old folks fermented in the cool of the cellar in the autumn. So, if your kitchen runs warm, watch your ferment closely and move it to the cool sooner. If your house is cool, give it more time and patience. And once it is soured to your liking, the cold of the cellar or a cold cupboard slows it nearly to a stop, holding it good for many months. That is the storing, simply keeping it cold after it has soured. There is the whole rhythm, warm to ferment, cold to keep. Let me tell you what this meant for a family in the old days, for it is more than a recipe. It is a kind of security. Before the freezer and the cannery, a family's survival through the winter depended on what it could put by in the autumn, and fermenting was one of the great pillars of that. A barrel of sauerkraut in the cellar was not a delicacy. It was insurance. Months of vegetables full of nourishment that needed no power and no jars and could not be taken by a power outage or a hard time. And there was a hidden gift in it. The old folks knew by experience, even if not by name. Fermented vegetables kept people healthy through the winter in a way that plain stored food did not. Sailors on long voyages eating sauerkraut were spared the sickness that killed those without it. There is real nourishment that the fermenting creates and unlocks, goodness for the body, beyond even what the fresh vegetable held. So a crock of kraut was food, insurance, and medicine all at once for the price of cabbage and salt. That is why it was in every cellar. And that is what we let ourselves forget. Now I want to take a moment because this is the part that matters. Think about who profits from your full freezer and your shelf of store-bought jars. The freezer hums in your cellar day and night, drawing power on the meter every hour of every year. And the day the power goes out for a few days, everything in it spoils at once and is lost. The cans and jars at the store are sold to you at a price that has nothing to do with the few cents of vegetable inside. The whole modern way of keeping food was built to keep you tied to the electric company and the grocery store, dependent, paying every month. And the oldest, surest, cheapest way of all, the crock of fermenting vegetables that asks for no power, no money, and keeps your gardens plenty alive through the winter, was simply let slip from memory. Not because it stopped working. It works as well as it ever did, and people the world over still live on it. But because a family with a cellar full of fermenting crocks does not need the freezer or the store, there is no company that profits from a head of cabbage and a handful of salt. So here is what I want you to do this week. Get yourself a head of cabbage and a box of plain salt and any large glass jar you have. Shred the cabbage, salt it, squeeze it with your hands until the brine runs, pack it down tight in the jar, and weight it under the liquid. Cover it loose, set it on the counter out of the sun, and watch for the bubbles. In a week, taste your first sauerkraut made with your own 2 hands for $1, and I promise you it will be better and more alive than anything in a can. And once you have done the cabbage, try a jar of carrots or beans the same way. Tell me in the comments below. Have you ever fermented anything and did it turn out, or did you have a crock go wrong on you? And did your grandparents keep a kraut crock in the cellar? What did they put in it? I read every single one of these, and the old ways you all share are the reason I keep doing this. Next time, I am going to show you how this same farm keeps a whole root cellar full of carrots and potatoes and apples crisp and good through the entire winter, with no power and no canning, in the cool of the ground. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, keep it under the brine, trust your nose, throw out what smells. Wrong, and remember the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.